As I recall, I first read the Pet Sematary script when I was an executive at Embassy Pictures in the early 80s. I thought it was one of the best scripts I'd ever read, perfect, and tried to get it made at Embassy, but they said no. The prevailing opinion in those years was that the time for Stephen King movies had come and gone. I left Embassy in 1985 to become an executive at Paramount, and once again, I tried to get Pet Sematary made, and once again, the answer was no. The prevailing opinion remained the same. I kept trying, but nothing happened until the WGA strike in 1988, when suddenly we couldn't hire any writers. Paramount, like all other studios, began to worry that there would be big holes in their release schedules the following year because there wouldn't be any movies in the pipeline. There was a staff meeting in the office of the studio president in which he appealed to all of the executives to come up with scripts that were so perfectly written that no further writing would be required. Scripts that were so good, we could just go ahead and shoot them as is. I started to raise my hand and he stopped me. "Don't you dare bring up Pet Sematary," he said. "But it's exactly what you're talking about," I said. "The script is perfect." He had to agree, so he gave the go-ahead for me to acquire the script, hire a director, and make the movie, which we did.
Pet Sematary fans, there's a lot of them. A lot of them. When we were shooting it, it was a big studio production, but it was low budget. And then, over the years, it's just become a big deal for many people. And I can't tell you why. It really hits people somehow.
I first saw Pet Sematary in the theater when it came out. I was just a big horror fan. I used to go see everything. So anything Stephen King that came out, you always made sure you went opening night. So yeah, I went and saw Pet Sematary and fell in love with it immediately. Sometimes dead's better. Been quoting that forever.
It was one of those films that you find with a group of friends and you all immediately love it. We were exposed to a lot of horror, but for some reason that one really stood out and scared the hell out of us as kids.
It was my first Stephen King book that I ever read. It scared me to death.
He doesn't just write a scary monster in the closet story. It's always a psychological aspect to it.
People have really connected with it, and it's surreal. It's a blessing. It's amazing.
The way it was shot visually was done very well. Mary Lambert had a great visual, artistic ability.
It made my career as a film director. It's still my most successful film.
The term in film is to make it work. Does the lighting work? Does the editing work? Does the performance work? It all worked really well.
Want to watch out that road.
My family was like, they want me to look good. They didn't get it on this one.
It's such a specific moment in time that I hardly remember, and yet it seems to have affected a generation of people so deeply, on this subconscious level, that it's just amazing to me that it can be so powerful.
Well, at least something good come of it. This place. Planting on the corpses here anyway, I guess.
I wrote a book called Pet Sematary, and I got pretty scared toward the end of that book, kind of, oh boy, just some of the things. It was very black, and when I finished the book, I actually put it in a drawer because I didn't think anybody would want to read anything like that, but they did.
When I interviewed Steve on one of the occasions back in, I think this was the late 80s, I asked him about his preparation for Pet Sematary. And he told me, he gave me the name of at least 3 books that he had researched carefully in learning about the lore of the Wendigo. It was essentially a Native American mythological figure that was especially pronounced during the winter months. And the reason that I think the Indians gave birth to this is because they wanted to create a taboo against cannibalism during those rough winter months where food is scarce. And the Wendigo is essentially this figure who, once it's led into a community, it wreaks havoc on the community. At the time that King was writing Pet Sematary, he was also writer-in-residence at the University of Maine, Orono. And the course that he was teaching was a course in 19th century British horror fiction. And the three texts were Frankenstein, Jekyll and Hyde, and Dracula. And I think that all three of those books have always had a pronounced influence on Steve. That's one of the reasons why he wanted to teach this course. He's always thought those books are the seminal texts in horror literature. But they also had a pronounced effect on the writing of Pet Sematary. All three of those texts, for example, revolve around the same theme of the destruction of the family. All three of those texts revolve around a monstrous presence that threatens to overcome normative behavior. And all three of those texts are about secrets, specifically male secrets, and keeping those male secrets from women. And that's what causes very often the destruction that centers all three of those texts. Is that, Judd Crandall's line that women are supposed to be good at keeping secrets, but I think men might be better.
Another British horror story to influence Stephen King while he was writing Pet Sematary was a 1902 short story by W.W. Jacobs called The Monkey's Paw. And essentially, The Monkey's Paw is about a talisman in the form of a dead monkey's paw that granted the possessor of it 3 wishes. The issue being that all 3 of these wishes came with a huge price. And essentially, the moral of the story is don't mess with fate. And of course, those themes are present in the story of Pet Sematary, and I think at one point King was even quoted as saying that Pet Sematary is essentially a retelling, in many ways, of the Monkey's Paw story.
Orrington is a real small town, very rural. Why they picked that area to live in, I'm not sure, other than it was available, I think. But Steve had rented the house in Orrington while he was teaching at the university. And behind the next door neighbor's house was an actual pet cemetery the kids in the neighborhood used. And the way his mind works, I mean, he can see something like that and get the beginnings of a story. And he obviously did.
They rented the house right next door to us, and it had always been a really creepy house because nobody had lived there. It was owned by, we called it the Pierce house. It was owned by the Pierce family, and it was always vacant for many, many, many years. And it was just a spooky old house, like a lot of those old colonials are in Orrington. And I certainly knew who Stephen King was when he moved to town. I had read some of his books at that point. I met him, sure, down at the corner store, and he rented an office at the corner store to actually write in for a number of years. So you would see him all the time, and he would go out for walks and cut across our lawn. You'd be sitting there watching TV and look up and, hey, there's Stephen King. We started the Pet Sematary in the early to mid-'70s out of necessity, basically, because growing up on Route 15 in Orrington, it's a major truck route.
There's an oil depot at the end, there's a pulp mill there, so there's trucks back and forth all the time. They lost a lot of pets.
You know, there's only so many you can bury in your side yard, so we just started putting them up in the field and making our little markers for them, and it was a place you could go visit your dead cat or dog or, the occasional goldfish that was intentionally taken out of the tank so it could be buried. So the spelling of Pet Sematary, neighbor up the road, Johnny, who was really into spray painting anything and everything, we decided our cemetery had to have a sign because there was a growing population. And so we gave Johnny the task of making the sign, and he showed up with it spelled the way it's spelled, and we had a really good laugh, and we should have known better than to stick him with spelling anything.
One of the reasons why the story of Pet Sematary is so effective is because at least part of it deals with real-life people and events in Stephen King's life. Ellie Creed's cat, Church, for example, and his untimely demise was based on King's daughter's cat, Smucky. And back in 1978, Smucky became one of the many victims of Route 15 when he was unfortunately struck by a passing vehicle. And of course, King knew it would break his daughter's heart when she found out about it, so he had considered not telling her. And it was actually his wife, Tabitha, that said they had to tell her because, as she said, she has to learn about death sometime. The next day, they buried Smucky in the pet cemetery. And it's interesting to note that when you watch the film, if you look closely, you'll see that the crew actually paid tribute to Smucky by putting his name on a grave marker.
As far as Gage getting run over, that was based on one of his boys running towards the road. And Steve grabbed him just at the side of the road as a truck went by. I guess he and Tabby were terrified by it, and eventually it worked its way into the story.
Stephen told me that in that period of like 5 seconds or 10 seconds between when he saw his son in danger and he saved his son from that danger, that the entire story of Pet Sematary flashed into his head.
This is the son that I took care of as a newborn in Maine. This fictional character, I knew this fictional character. This was real flesh and blood, and which made it even more, I think, emotional as far as dealing with child death. I said to him, this is a horrible story. It's very emotionally charged, and I don't think you should have this published. He laughed.
When Steve originally wrote the book and turned it in, the buying committee didn't like it because it dealt with the death of a child, and it was a taboo subject back then. And I think Steve and Tabby were in agreement because it was such a dark story that they didn't think it was what it should be. So, it wasn't a big deal that they didn't accept it. But it set for a few years, and Steve had left Doubleday and gone to Viking, and Doubleday owed him some royalty money. And the way they got it in one lump sum was give us another book. And they decided to give him Pet Sematary again, because they promoted it heavily. If you look on the back of the dust jacket, it says, is it possible for Stephen King to terrify himself? And, this book did it.
Well, when I learned that he had written a book based on My Pet Sematary, it was really quite mind-boggling to think that something I did in some small way inspired such a great writer to write a book. I mean, I had to have the book the moment it came out.
But when the book came out, there was a tremendous demand for it. I mean, it became a huge bestseller because of that tagline, I think. I mean, people wanted to know what would scare Steve, and so they bought the book in massive numbers, and it's a fantastic story.
Okay, the era of the 80s is really, as everyone knows, the era of the slasher film. It began in the very late 70s with Halloween, and by the time 1980 rolled around, it was Friday the 13th, and then a number of minor horrors like Night School and Graduation Day. They were usually associated with a holiday. But by the time the mid-80s came around, there was really, in my opinion, the horror film was drifting. And we were actually seeing more science fiction stuff, like Terminator was big, and Aliens. So there was nothing that was strictly horror until Pet Sematary came along. And unlike these other films where there were slashers, all the people who died in this film you cared about to a certain extent.
It's definitely more of a story of love and loss.
It's one thing to have the scares. It's another thing to affect people emotionally. And
I just had to put my dog to sleep a couple weeks ago, and it just broke my heart. And the whole Pet Sematary thing went through my mind, like, what if, what if, would I, if I could, bring her back?
But the fact that there was a very strong human emotional base to it all is what made it what it is. A very good story, an excellent film, I think.
Stephen King really wanted the film to be made in Maine because there had been a clamor about him living in Maine, but his films being shot in Los Angeles. So that was one of many reasons that Pet Sematary was very difficult to get made. One was King insisted that it be his screenplay, and his other stipulation was that it be shot in Maine. And what I understood at the time was he was doing this as an answer to his neighbors in Maine who said, why don't you shoot here and bring all that money here?
A movie brings in lots and lots of money. I mean, that's the bottom line. But it's expensive for them to do it. They can go to Washington State and make it look like Maine, or places in California, or Canada, where when the dollar was cheaper. Canada was an easy place, but Maine's expensive to get to.
These were difficulties, I think, in making the film financially. And I think it took a long, long time for all of the pieces to come into place.
And Steve's proud of Maine. I mean, he's proud of the fact that he's a native here.
He has become such a member of the Bangor community that everybody thinks of him as a great neighbor. But Stephen King is an incredible neighbor too, because he has donated and he's given so much financially to the Bangor community to save public transportation, to help reconstruct the library, ballparks, and I'm sure numerous other things.
He has this great house in Bangor. I'm assuming he still lives there and has this, big wrought iron fence in front of it with bats, and kids love to trick or treat there because of it.
Stephen and Tabitha are real people. And people always look at icons like Stephen is of the horror world as somebody that's untouchable. To this day, he gets his own groceries when he's in town in Bangor. Very, very approachable.
There's the monetary aspect of what he's brought into the state by doing Pet Sematary. And it's a story based in Maine. Why not shoot it here?
Let's give Dale the Jerry pack and have the doll on it. Rehearsal, please. Everybody else, clear frame.
So it was thrilling to all of us. It was exciting because everyone wanted to know if they were going to be in the movie or have something to do with the film.
I was so excited that this opportunity presented itself because it's not often that a big filmmaker comes to town and you get a chance to be an extra. I mean, this is Maine, it's not Los Angeles.
The acting community was happy that it was happening because the Maine Film Commission for a period of time there was making a concerted effort to try to bring more film into Maine, especially with the fact that Maine has such diverse geographic. It's a great place to bring a film.
It was exciting and marvelously shocking. I didn't think we'd ever have a big major film filmed here in Hancock, Maine. But everybody was talking about it, sure, one way or the other, whether negatively or positively, and up and down the road out here. And then when they actually came and showed up, and it was real, and we all got a chance. I don't know how many people in town actually stopped by the set, but a lot did, at least once.
We had lots of visitors to the set. I mean, you'd think in this remote location. I remember one day looking up and there was Charlie Sheen.
He was a friend of David Anderson's, who was the makeup, he applied the makeup, him and his assistant, John Blake. Charlie had just come off of Wall Street, I guess. So he was quite the thing,
Who else? Oh, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar showed up. He was friends with Richard Rubenstein, and he was hanging out on the set. It was a fun set. My sets are always fun, though.
She set up a good environment to be able to work, which I think is so important. And she really made a good movie.
The reason I directed Pet Sematary was Stephen King, because he had authority, he had approval over the director. And I was on the list because I was kind of the flavor of the month because of all my music video work at the time. And I was like an up-and-coming young director in Hollywood.
She comes from painting. She went to the Rhode Island School of Design. She started as a painter. She's very visual. She'll bring in a lot of different elements, images from paintings, images from poetry, rock and roll, so it all has room to play.
It was a woman directing a horror film. And I don't mean horror genre kind of film. But she loved it because it wasn't just only killing people. It was a small town, and it was just a family moving to a lovely new place. And odd things happened.
I remember my mother telling us that she had directed Madonna videos and how cool that was. Because obviously Madonna was just the biggest thing at the time.
I want you to stop, I don't know, at that red box.
Stop it, boy.
There was Halloween and there was Friday the 3rd. This was different. Stephen's scripts, books are different than the Fridays and the Halloweens. It's got a whole other slant on it. So they wanted it done from a softness because it made it that much scarier.
Should we wait till Rachel takes the baby for the goldfishy line? Okay, let's try it again.
I think at one point even George Romero was supposed to direct the film. He and Stephen King had worked together before on Creepshow, but I believe he was working on Monkey Shines and was committed to that project and couldn't do it. But I think ultimately having Mary direct the film sort of broke the mold of a lot of the horror films and some of the zombie films that were being produced in the 1980s.
Where's sound? Oh, sound is now camera.
I had done Friday the 13th Part 2, and I really didn't love horror films. And I said, for my career, I'm not going to shoot another horror film. And then Fred Gwynne came to me. He put his arm around me, and he said, Peter, I want you to understand, this is not a horror film. This is a film about life and death. You know, it's much deeper than just an exploitation film. But the kicker was, he said to me, listen, I lost a child, and I wouldn't be doing this. I said, oh my gosh, you know, he lost a child, and I really liked him, and I really liked working with him, and I really liked everybody. So I decided to do it.
I was hired as lead greens, which lead greens, it's sometimes people go, what's that? It's taking care of any of the exterior sets of the Pet Cemetery, the Micmac burial ground, the front of Judd's house. Keeping the Pet Cemetery looking creepy was my main job.
I went up to the production office. I was sitting there and I heard somebody come out and they said, we're looking for some new swing gang. And they told me what it was. I was assistant to the set decorator. And I went up to the set decorator and I said, if you will give me a chance, I will work for you for a week for free. If you like me, hire me. If you don't, just say goodbye and I'll be on my way. And she said, okay, you've got to be in Blue Hill in an hour. Here's the guy that you're working with. And we took off.
Mary fell in love with Denise as soon as she walked in. Denise is a strong actress.
I remember having a screen test with Dale. It was narrowed down to 4 different actors, 2 women, 2 males. And it was, you know, the phone call came from Mary, of course, saying, you know, we're going to do this movie.
Pet Sematary is actually one of the only horror films I ever did. And we were in Stephen King's backyard, basically, you know, and I think that was perfect.
Dale in the 80s was the heartthrob. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I do remember him coming in and Mary and I going, wow. But he was also working incessantly. So Paramount wanting a bit of a name, we still had a very small budget, but Dale was a name that people knew. And he wanted to do it. He wanted to have another side of his personas.
I think that King is very careful about wanting him to be a doctor in the course of this film. And I think the reason for that is because the role of the doctor is essentially to defeat death, or at least to push death into abeyance for as long as possible. And the story begins, the narrative begins with Creed essentially losing his first patient, Victor Pasca.
The year before, a film came out that I was in called The Bedroom Window, and it got me a lot of notice. And one of the people who had seen it was Mary Lambert. She wanted to meet me, and we talked about the part, and we were on the same page as far as Pascal being a more of an angel than a ghost. The cover of my script, before we started working on it, I put all these pictures of angels on the cover of my script to constantly remind me that I'm not a ghost, I'm not a creepy, scary character.
He's like the poster boy for Pet Sematary. That was Dave's work, Dave Anderson, my son.
Generally, on a film set, hopefully, it's a lot of laughs. We had a lot of laughs in the trailer that night when Charlie was there. And also, oh boy, during all those makeup hours, David and John were so great. The hours went by very quickly because it was just fun, lively conversations, and a lot of joking around.
We got our SAG cards really young. I think we started doing baby modeling when we were 6 months old, and I think we did our first national network commercial at like 3 years old. Yeah. We did a lot of twin stuff.
Usually when you hire twins, one of the twins will be a really good athlete and good at the stunts, and the other one is better with dialogue. And I don't know. It's never an equal thing, though. They're never interchangeable.
Blaze had an audition first. She had the first audition, and I think they liked her and heard she had a twin. And so I went in on the callback with her. They really liked the two of us together. And because of child labor laws at the time, I think that probably helped because they realized they could get more work out of us.
there are a certain amount of hours a minor is allowed to work. And that can be detrimental to your shooting schedule because you have a teacher going off the set. So when you're fortunate enough to find identical twins, one is off the set, the next one comes in and takes over the role.
I love working with children, actually. They're always in the moment, they're always present, they always connect with you, and they never really have an agenda. So for me, when I hear that I get to work with a kid, it's a good thing.
It's funny, out of all the films I've done, I think I enjoy watching Pet Sematary the most because it's the easiest to disconnect myself from it because I was so young and I look so different. I can enjoy it objectively.
Miko Hughes was a really important part of this film. And he was not even 3 years old. And he delivered an actor's performance. And it was another piece of casting that I really went to bat for.
And Paramount was not happy. They wanted twins. Shoot it, scheduling. Didn't matter, and Mary won that fight. Because this is a unique little boy, to say the least.
Mary did something that was, I think, critical to the success of the film, which was she shot as much as she could in sequence to get Nico's trust, that he would feel safe, that he would get to know everyone, get to feel safe with me as his mom, his movie mom, and would be able to, be free, be able to, do what was going to be asked of him later on in the film as it got progressively more difficult.
Considering I was so young that my memories are very spotty. They're like picture memories. They're not so much a whole day or a specific event.
When my husband, David Anderson, was doing Miko Hughes' makeup on Pet Sematary, he actually would call me from Maine and say, wow, I'm having a tough time here with Miko, because he's so young and I have to put these terrible makeups on him. And I think that was the toughest part for him of the whole movie, actually, was trying to provide an atmosphere for this very young child so that he wasn't going to be scarred for life.
And the parents were there, and they brought him in. I said, is there any way we can, well, not sedate him, but does he have a nap time, And they did. They brought him in when it was like his nap time, and then I would take a life cast of his hand. Then I'd try to take a little life cast of his face, and he'd wake up, and that would get destroyed, So we really never got a life cast of his face, so that had to be sculpted.
They were really fabulous about making a lot of stuff a game, so that he psychologically wouldn't be too damaged.
It's funny, about 4 years later, I ran into him at an event, and and he literally ran across the lawn and jumped in my arms, gave me a big hug.
So then later, I am acting myself in Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and they cast Miko Hughes as my son. And it actually made it really easy to, start at a place where we really knew each other already.
People say it's hard to work with children and animals. I work with both in Pet Sematary, and I didn't find actually that working with the child very difficult at all. The cats were another story altogether.
So there was actually a training that happened before the film where we had to get comfortable with the cats, and I think there was actually 7 or 9 of them. There was quite a few. Yeah, there was a whole cats.
To create the effect in the cat's eyes, we had heard that cats' eyes are very sensitive to light, and so we flipped the glass that was reflecting the light so that instead of directing it onto the film, it was directing it out. And it's such a minuscule amount of light that it has no effect on the scene. You'd never see it. But for a cat's eyes, the cat's eyes picked it up.
They all had different names, and I think they were all trained for different skills.
They had them in a wagon called the Prowler. They had their names and their little beds where they slept. And the night I was there, they had a scene where he had to go up the tree. The cat had to run across the road and go up the tree out here. And the little cat he was great. He was a ham, really. It was fun to hear the director say, quiet on the set, cat is acting. And the little guy got out of the box and he walked right over with his tail twitching and went right up the tree and went like this. And they took it on one take.
There were several casting calls for local people to come to get that look. They asked for a lot of pictures to be sent ahead, and they were cast on a local basis.
I studied theater at the University of Maine. I originally was from Lexington, Mass, and went up to the University of Maine to study theater, and ended up staying there after I graduated.
I remember when they had the advertisements in the paper and so on about the casting call to go to the Grand Theater.
As soon as I saw the ad, it was like I was laser focused on this audition. And I remember the very first, there was any number of different, auditions, one after another. But the first one was this gigantic open call.
And all kinds of people were talking about it, and lots of people went. I'd say several hundred probably from the whole county.
And it just took hours to get through the doors into that theater. And then we're in the auditorium, and you sit and you kind of move your way up, and finally you're there with one of the casting directors.
Basically, everyone is coming in to be an extra at that point, or I thought I was coming in to be an extra. Because to me, like growing up in Maine, the idea of being in a Stephen King movie, even if I just had a walk-on, was like a big deal.
I showed up at this big room, and there were a lot of children my age. They were bringing us in one by one, putting us in front of a camera, and gave us this scenario about pretend your dog just died.
And then she looks at me and she says, "Now, I want you to do it again, but I want you to pretend you're possessed by an alien." I'm like, well, being the method actress that I am, I just drew on past experience, right? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I've been involved in trucking my whole life. I started working with trucks when I was 14, and I just delivered produce up in Montreal, Quebec, and came home and went to Dysart's truck stop in Herman, Maine. And Mary Lambert and Stephen King and some producers were there having lunch, and they sat me down, talked to me, and they wanted me to pretend I was driving a truck.
At this point when I tell people, people are just incredibly impressed. Like, you were in Pet Sematary? And then they say, what part were you in? And I say, I played Zelda's sister. And like, people have a very visceral reaction to that.
They're still rehearsing, and they're about to bring in Zelda, I guess, as soon as Zelda's ready.
Our brother auditioned to be Zelda because they were looking for boys.
I knew that Zelda had to be terrifying because that's what drives Rachel over the edge.
Zelda was the freakiest thing of all.
I wanted her to die. I wanted her to die. I knew that Zelda had to be somebody that everybody wanted to die in order to sell that scene later with Denise.
I would say still to this day, when I tell people that the role of Zelda was played by a male actor, that's the most interesting thing I could possibly tell them about the film.
Well, we started with women. And, many of the women didn't want to go that far. Someone had to come and bring to us something that we'd never seen. So when it was not happening with the females, why not open it up?
I just thought that it would be strange, that if we got a really thin, young boy, that it would be more frightening.
I auditioned for a casting director. Then another couple days later, I auditioned for Mary Lambert. It was in a conference room in an office. So I got underneath the table and kind of like crawled up over the table and started crawling toward Mary as I was doing the lines.
No, I remember meeting Andrew and feeling like, A, he had the physique that I was looking for, but B, that he wanted to do it, that he was into it.
By the time I got to Maine, I knew what I wanted to do, which is basically what I did for Mary in the audition. Didn't really know at that point what they were going to be putting on me in terms of makeup, and that only helped. But I already had a voice, and I figured I would roll with whatever they gave me to do physically.
And I read the part about Zelda and how she has meningitis, and I researched it a little bit and found out that meningitis, what it is and how it looks, and that my object was to kind of recreate that spine deforming like that and the stages that they go through, and then they start losing weight, getting sick, and on the verge of dying.
They glued like around 1/8 of an inch to 1/2 inch of foam all over the face and head, around the neck, the hands, and of course all the way down the back, which is where you get that cool back thing.
Turn this guy into a woman and add rubber on him, you know. It was quite a challenge to do that.
I thought it was going to be, 5 hours, 6 hours, just kept going. Because after they put it on, then they had to make it up. After that, I never got out of makeup for the next 24 hours at least. We just shot till it was done. And by that time, I really wanted to pull it off because, it was very claustrophobic. And I did actually. And skin started to come with it. So I stopped that immediately because they had to put a solvent on to dissolve the glue, which they glued it on. And then it took another 8 hours for them to take it off. So by that time, I was cooked.
I was blown away by his acting. He just got into that character so well.
He was terrifying. And in between takes, he would sort of go back to being like a normal 18-year-old boy. But then he would start to like kind of screw around with me and be like, Rachel.
The Zelda scene is definitely my favorite. I mean, because that scared the shit out of me. I mean, that was legitimately one of those moments when I was a kid and I saw that and it creeped me out big time.
You can put your makeup on somebody, but if they don't act the part and believe this makeup and believe in themselves that they are this poor distressed woman, it doesn't work. And he worked that makeup and he worked that character.
When I read the script, my first reaction to it was that it was like a child's drawing. It's about the death of a child. The heart of this movie is the death of a child. And that the movie itself is like a child's drawing. There's a mommy and a daddy and a house and a tree and a brother and a sister and a cat. And it just it was in my mind like that. But the person who's not in that drawing is Judd Crandall. And he's critical to the narrative.
He's the one that sets the whole story in motion. He shouldn't have done what he did.
His advice is what causes Lewis to do the thing that destroys him.
Judd Crandall. I live just across the road. Want to watch out that road. Them damn trucks go back and forth all day and most of the night.
I feel like most people remember Judd's character the most. I mean, pretty much every time you mention Pet Sematary, someone does that
His great Maine accent. Yeah,
down that road, over there.
So
everyone's got their impression of Fred Gwynne in that movie.
I've always loved Fred Gwynne. I loved Car 54. I loved The Munsters. I've seen him on Broadway. He was an amazing actor and not fully appreciated, I don't think, by the industry. But I don't know, I never thought of anyone else but Fred. And at first Paramount felt that because of The Munsters, that people would think it was funny and that it would take people out of the movie. And I said, well, let me go meet with him. And that did nothing to dissuade me. I fell immediately in love with him. I didn't change my mind. I came back and I told Paramount that was what I wanted,
You don't look further. You look no further. What? He'd like to play this? Book it. Next. It was Fred Gwynne.
The first time I met Fred, we immediately had a chemistry, I just, he's just a big old bear, a big old kid, and I ended up spending a lot of time with Fred. I ended up going to, he had a cabin on a lake, and I went to dinner at his house with his wife, Deborah, many, many nights.
He was incredible in the role. He was exactly that guy. He was exactly Judd Crandall when you read the book with his accent.
And it was such a part that he had not played. That's what you look for in the actors. The ones that haven't played it a million times. So that when he plays something differently, the audience just goes, wow.
Okay, yeah. Okay, let's get in.
I love the man. I really did. It was the best part of the experience of Pet Sematary for me was being with Fred Gwynne, meeting with Fred Gwynne, and becoming a really good friend of his.
I did get to meet Fred Gwynne, thankfully. It was just a moment, it was a moment of, looking up and then up at this very, very tall man whose voice was like a pipe organ. It was beautiful.
I have a couple children's books he gave me. He was an illustrator and a writer. He wrote some kids' books, and they're really, really interesting. For kids, kind of interesting ideas and really, really cool artwork. I still have those signed from him and packed away.
I kind of fell in love with him. I think it's hard to not fall in love with him. I'd always kind of loved his work, and so meeting him was thrilling. And we talked a little bit about doing a Maine accent, him and I, because we were two of the people who were doing the Maine accent. And he just was, I don't know, you just wanted to hug him. Or you wanted him to hug you, actually.
It's interesting because of because of what the movie was about. We would spend a lot of time talking about death and the hereafter, and what do you think is going to happen after. And Fred had this very clear vision of what he thought was coming after his death, which was the most beautiful concept, the most beautiful image, the most beautiful place he could ever imagine. He said, that's where I'm going to be. That's what's going to happen. And he was very specific about it. And I have a feeling he's there.
I think everybody was really into doing this movie. I think we all felt we were lucky to be there and having a good time doing it and wanting to make it work.
Working with Susan Blumart was wonderful. You know, I hired her because she's a solid body of work and she's a really good actress.
I was there actually when they hung her, and it really freaked me out. It looked so real.
You know, whenever you hang somebody in a movie, you have to build a harness, and then the harness has to be in such a way that you don't sense that they're hanging from their arms, and the actor's got to give you something. Otherwise, it looks like they're hanging from their arms.
I actually asked the production company to see if I could talk to a psychiatrist. I wanted to talk to somebody about what insight they might be able to give me of the state of a person who is actually able to take their own life. Because my feeling, my instinct was that by the time you're actually ready to walk off the table, I think you probably have gone through the gamut of emotion. And I think you're just on a mission. That I had decided that my mother died of cancer and that I took care of her. And I knew exactly what I was in for with cancer. So when I walked down the stairs and got on the table and put the rope around my neck, I remember thinking, I'm going to Mama. And I do remember saying, Mama, Mama, as I walked to the edge of the table. When the film was playing in New York City, I got a call from a friend. And she said, you have got to go to Midtown to see Pet Sematary. Times Square is, as often the movie houses are very participatory, depending on the genre of film. And so when I got up on the table and started walking to the table, she said there was a whole crowd of kids that went, jump, bitch!
I was completely entranced with the nature and the landscape of Maine. I went to school in New England, and I love New England, and I'd never spent that much time in Maine. I'd been to Maine before, but mostly along the seacoast.
I love New England, and Maine is kind of the epitome of everything that's good about New England.
Being in Maine was tremendous. It was so beautiful, and we, of course, frequented all the local restaurants and little shops.
Our parents actually rented a house in Maine during the filming of the movie. We had birthday parties, and where we pretty much invited like anybody we had met during the filming that was under 10 years old and lived on our streets.
The locals in Ellsworth were all really nice, very kind. I got to know several of them because I would hang out at the local diner. That's where I'd go for breakfast. And I would listen to what people were saying about this film company invading their little town. A lot of them did not like the traffic hang-ups.
Everyone was warned. The film company was very good about telling us. They even provided schedules so that we knew that the road was going to be blocked off at certain days and hours. But still, and it was true for me too one time because I was in a hurry. And so we'd zoom up the road and say, oh, damn the movie, and have to turn around and go back again. Some people were bothered by the lights at nighttime. They were very glaring out here, and you could see them for miles away. It was like a spaceship had landed in Hancock, Maine.
My boyfriend at the time was David Anderson, and he was the special effects makeup artist on set. And he had invited me to come to Maine for a long weekend.
Dave met Heather at a party where she was at, but he was working on a Wes Craven film at the time.
We ended up spending the night in a little town, I think it was Bar Harbor, and he proposed to me that night. I was totally surprised, and he actually didn't have a ring for me, but he had bought a diamond at the Ellsworth jewelry shop, I think, and so he presented that to me, and I have to say I was completely flabbergasted, but I ended up saying yes.
I think that there's really no place in the world like Maine. It's like Maine is a character within the story.
One of the leading characters, I think. The town, the area, the way it looks, the people, the houses. It's a big part of the movie.
The whole vibe of the place just lent itself to that kind of picture, you know, that kind of what if, what could happen, and anything could happen.
I can't imagine not shooting that film in Maine. You get out of your reality and you completely invest in this imaginary tale.
For us actors, it was great because we could just soak up the local culture and try our best to replicate it. And it's not so much like the accents, that you can learn an accent anywhere, like Fred's accent or the housekeeper's accent.
But it's hard not to make it too cliche. You don't want to do too cliche. I do remember the line though. I think he asked me how I'm feeling or something. I bet I'll know what it is.
The land is part of the story. The characters refer to the land being sacred, the land being dangerous, the land being a character in the movie. You need it to be in that place, and we were blessed that we were there and not on some Hollywood soundstage.
I mean, it's 20 minutes from Stephen King's house. And, you know, Stephen King was obviously around. He was around for the rehearsals, the read-throughs when we got there. He was around the first day of shooting.
It was fun having him on the set and watching him collaborate with Mary on different things. But he wasn't trying to push his ideas. In fact, there were some things that, like the ending and different things that he actually liked, the changes made from the book. He endorsed them.
I remember Fred following around going, you know, man, I really want to pick your brain. Fred kept saying that to Stephen. I think it freaked Stephen out, which it's hard to believe that anything could freak Stephen King out, but I think it freaked him out a little.
As a writer of horror novels and films, it's just, you think he's gonna be really scary, and he's a big guy, but he was really a gentle and nice guy. I remember him picking us up over his head and reading our Archie comic books with us.
Ready?
Ready, and go.
That's a cut.
The locations in Maine, the physical landscape in Maine is like a fairy tale landscape. The rocks and the moss and the ocean and the cliffs and the mountains and the fog.
Bill Dunn, the location manager, did a spot-on job at finding some remote yet close by, only an hour within our centrally located studios here in Ellsworth.
Mary and the other principals fell in love with the house that was going to be the Creed house.
It was the perfect house for this movie. It just was right out of the book.
It had so many of the elements we wanted for that house, but it was missing a tree with a tire swing. They decided the best case scenario was to go with the house they love and move a mature tree to plant in this yard and put their tire swing on there.
There's still a spot in the lawn down there. It was about 5 in the morning they put that tree in, but it didn't make it. It just, you know, we tried to save it. We watered it, but it had to come down.
Betty and Charlie Lewis were two of the finest people that I met. They're good Maine people and concerned about their property, but totally amenable to just as long as you put it back the way it was, we'll be okay with that.
At the time, we were running a paint and wallpaper store in Ellsworth, but friends were visiting, and they approached him on the porch. And he sent them to Ellsworth to talk to us. They would have moved us out of town someplace. We moved across the street. We were living in here. And we said, no, we'll just move over there and live in the little house.
She still did her laundry in the ranch because she could access that. So we'd see her, and he points, she'd say, I'm coming out, you better stop rolling. And she'd be coming out with her laundry out back.
They rebuilt, they rented that place in Ellsworth, and they rebuilt the kitchen. They had every detail, even the nick out of a door or something.
So we built all the interiors up about 4 feet. And the reason for that is because we had stairs that had to look like they were going downstairs. So we built it raised up off of the floor to accommodate that. When we weren't working on the big house, we were in this studio space reconstructing what was matching what was inside the family's home, trying to match it, to every detail. The designers had extremely detailed plans of exactly how it should look, so it looked exactly like it.
I remember thinking it was so cool how Judd's house was fake. It was actually a set built onto another house so that it could be across the street from the Creed house.
We couldn't find 2 houses that I liked that were in that proximity. So we built a facade in front of this little sort of modern ranch house that was across the street from the Creed's house.
We have this little house that we need to build this lovely Victorian around. So the first thing is we laid out kind of the footprint of it, and then we brought in a utility truck that planted telephone poles in a row along the front, which was going to be part of the structure that would kind of stabilize everything we built around it. Then we also, on top of the small house, we built this structure. They were like big platforms that were lifted down onto the roof. And that was the framework for sort of holding the sides together, because it wasn't even a 4-sided house. It was really a couple of facades that looked like a house. Once those telephone poles were in place, then we started building the house, framing it out very much like you would a real house, except without necessarily the foundation. So we would build it up with the studs and get the whole framework with 2x4s like any other house. But one of the big differences we had was taking the sheetrock, which normally goes on the inside of a house, and we put it on the outside of the structure so that we started creating a fire barrier between that structure and the little house that was inside. And then once that sheetrock was on, then we finished the house to make it look like it was, a real house. We did real shingles and trim and finished it out. So from the outside, it looked quite real.
If you've read the book Pet Sematary, Stephen does describe the house as having undergone a transformation, as if the evil spirits from the Pet Sematary have come through the earth. And I really wanted it to feel that way, because when I couldn't get all those moths and all that stuff that was in the woods in Maine, and I realized what it was going to cost us in terms of time and money to bring an entire crew and walk up this hill and to shoot a little patch of moss, I'm like, well, let's put it in Judd's house.
The idea was that in this kind of nightmarish scene, everything was supposed to look like it was sinking into the floor and oozing through the walls. There was this beautiful old Victorian organ that was one of the props in it. And they had me take a saw and slice the bottom off of it, set it back down on the floor so it looked like it was sinking into the floor, which broke my heart because this beautiful antique I just sawed right in half.
That was one of the places where I was really happy with what the designers came up with.
We took an expandable foam in between the lath of the walls and sprayed it in there, and it grows and oozes and drips out, so it looks like this ooze is really, invading the house.
They have the flashback scene of Judd's house when it's all pristine and beautiful and brand new. Well, we had already distressed the house, and it had taken 3 weeks to get it there, and we were right ready to shoot, and Mary said, oh no, we forgot to shoot the house before we did that. Because there's the Judd scene, we forgot about the young flashback. And she goes, well, let's do it tomorrow morning. So we had a turnover of 12 hours to get the house back to pristine. Then what ends up in the shot is only that corner of the house. And we're like, oh my God.
There was a small trailer, and in the trailer was me and the dog getting made up at the same time. The dog getting to look like he, had come back from the dead and not looking great. So every time he went out, they kept sending him back because he didn't look crappy enough.
They did set me up with a trailer where they gave me a costume and my breakfast. And then they brought me to another trailer for hair and makeup, and then they put me on set.
Matt Farrell played young Judd in the film, and little did I know then what connection I would have with him later. He later became a student of mine at Bangor High School.
And she, before I even met her, before I knew her, knew that I was attending that school and remembered me from that set and had no problem telling the entire theater class about my yelling out my own name instead of my dog's name.
Mary was very patient with him. She'd say, now come on out of the door. We're rolling, but don't let that bother you. And he would come out and he immediately said, Judd, what's the matter, boy? Cut. We did 9 takes of him calling Spot Judd.
When finally the director actually was a little short with me and she said, no, your name's Judd, this is Spot.
What most people don't realize is that there were actually 2 dogs that were used for Spot. And in the scene, you'll notice the shadow of the original dog on the sheet that was hanging from the clothesline. The reason that dog was never actually seen in the film was because of the fact that he just couldn't act convincingly scary.
They didn't use a live dog during the scene. I was staring at a stuffed animal while I was delivering my lines.
The Armory, where we built the interior of Fred's bedroom, it's now the rec center in Bangor. We had rented the Armory and we're sharing it with the State National Guard. We also had the special effects that were making the bodies. John Blake and David Anderson created these awesome dummies. They had 2 of Fred, one where he was just getting his mouth cut through, and one with his jaw all eaten up by the evil Gage creature. And Denise's dummy was actually a body cast that they did of her, weighed 70 pounds. So when Dale's carrying it, it's heavy, it's really heavy. The Miko dummy, Miko's body actually is bigger than the little dummy.
We used that all over the place. I mean, it was used flying out of the ceiling. When Denise Crosby drops down, her body drops down. Then the puppet came flying down on a cable. Here you can see this is the puppet, and it comes down. So she's hanging there, and the puppet comes down and attacks.
When I'm acting with a puppet, I call it Star Trek acting. And I know the way they're going to cut it and edit it, as long as I give the, a true commitment, to that this is happening, this is him. That in the end, when all the editing is done, it will come out and look real.
He also wound up getting burned. We had 2 of them. He got set in the corner, and the fire came to him, and he got burned up.
One of the state police who came in just to poke, his state police officer stopped by to see what was going on, poked his head in, saw Fred's covered up. He thought it was a real person with his face half eaten off. He went running for the bathroom, retching like crazy. It was very realistic.
We were shooting through the night, and we did 2 nights of shooting. One night on a soundstage, and the other night in the house, Bellevue, I think it was called.
Bellevue was chosen because it's the most Chicago-looking house in Hancock. When Bellevue was built, it was very controversial because it was an English-style house from England, all of a sudden on Hancock Point. And that Tudor style is not, there's no other house in Hancock like that. And I suppose that's why they picked, I'm sure that's why they picked it. Because in the insides as well as the outsides could be a suburb of Chicago.
Scene as Denise Crosby's running through the airport and gets to me and shakes me like a rag doll, is what I remember anyway, and tells me to stop the plane. My brilliant line was, I can't. It was filmed in the Bangor International Airport, and in fact, all the airport scenes were filmed in that airport. And I fly in and out of there all the time today. And I see the very corner where that scene was filmed. I often travel through that same gate.
One of the locations that we shot at on a Saturday was at the Ellsworth City Hall, the back steps of it. And we had to shoot there because we weren't allowed to go on Orono's campus, which is where the character, Louis Creed, is supposed to be the doctor of Cutler Health Center on Orono campus. But we weren't allowed to shoot there, so Ellsworth graciously gave us their city hall and let us change 2 of their offices into ER rooms.
The actual filming locations in movies are often far more geographically complex than they appear in the film, and Pet Sematary is certainly no exception. Take, for instance, the journey from the Creed house to the Micmac burial ground. The path behind the house is long gone, but if you were to follow where it was into the woods, you wouldn't find the spot where the actual Pet Sematary was. You'd have to walk 1 town over to Ellsworth to see it. Beyond the deadfall was a trail of twisted tree roots that Fred and Dale had climbed, and that in fact is an actual hiking trail in Acadia National Park almost 20 miles away. And of course, one of the most impressive locations in the film was an old granite quarry, one of a few that can be found on Mount Desert Island.
You'll see, as you did in the film, what are called hash marks. They're the slab marks of where the cutting machine digs out a slab of granite. But amazingly, Fred was so spry and able to actually hoist himself up. So when you see Fred walking through the quarry, he's really walking and jumping up on those stones. There's no safety net.
Welcome to Micmac.
So what do you know about this location, Shaw?
Well, somebody's buried up here. I don't know who it is. Everybody will tell me. I've been asking
Let's check the
a
crew
long
list
time.
and see who's not here.
Yeah.
Right now we're standing at the site of the Micmac Cemetery. It's actually a very old blueberry field in Sedgwick, Maine. This was a great and really interesting shoot. It was a few nights of night shooting, actually probably a week of night shooting. It was great to be out here at night. I was on one night on standby, so basically I came out here and sat around most of the night. I remember the trucks being parked out in this area behind where the actual camera work was all done.
First of all, just to get a feeling for what the place looks like. You can't tell unless you're up high. So I knew we needed a crane for that to get the high angle looking down. And then, you know, dollying across the rocks and figuring out those things so it's not boring and it keeps the viewer's interest to do interesting things visually.
We were out here before dark, setting up and getting ready for things, and there was a big ring of rocks out here. That was the Micmac stones. They were whitewashed. They stood out very well. There was a great pattern in there. The Greens crew had gotten out there and had spent a lot of time whitewashing rocks and setting them out.
And doing research on the Micmac and finding out that they had the tripod animal fetishes coming up through, where if you got the spirit animal of the person that's just died and burn the remains of that animal, it carries their soul to heaven.
When I first go up to the burial ground, I'm not supposed to be affected by it, but at night, that movie took on a whole different feeling, you know, and we did a lot of night shooting. When it's cold and dark and, you know, everything gets quiet and they say, quiet on set, it gets a little eerie.
The pet cemeteries mirror one another, which is, I think, a very effective device in itself, to have one cemetery be this place where children have come to bury their pets, and that is a place that's, you know, lush and green. Judd Crandall says this is a good place, this is a safe place. It's a place where children come to grieve.
How can you call it a good thing? A graveyard for pets killed in the road, built and maintained by broken-hearted children.
I think it's rather extraordinary.
Extraordinarily morbid.
Then there is the other ground that has soured, and it mirrors the one that's underneath it, insofar as, like the pet cemetery itself, it revolves around circles and it revolves around spirals. But these circles and spirals are not about closure, as they are, I think, in the lower Pet Sematary. They're about opening out. And of course, they open out as an invitation to evil, to join this place and to participate in the dark magic that's at work there. Whereas in the actual Pet Sematary where the kids come, the leash stays there. There's closure. The circle closes at that point.
We had to replicate a piece of the Micmac burial ground. We had to build a 6-foot stanchion so they could fit the cameraman underneath. And then we had to carve out of styrofoam some bigger rocks. And Miko's little hand was to push up through and then to wave at the camera. And he did just that, but got lots of dirt in his mouth when he did it. So he's waving and choking at the same time.
I remember being really impressed with the actual Pet Sematary set because they did such a good job at making all the different graves of all the different animals look like they were from different eras.
When they showed me the location and said, this is where you're going to build the Pet Cemetery, the first thing I did, hire my brother, who's a landscaper, to actually excavate the land. We brought in truckloads of dirt, dumped it in the center, we raked and did a topographical map, basically, of where we were going to map out the 3 circles. I brought in the truckloads of the boulders and dumped them at 2 points where then I was going to build the deadfall.
They were able to make it look like something that had just naturally come about.
And we brought in tons and tons of sod from Surrey Gardens, and then we went to the dump and got a whole bunch of fencing. We got some newel posts that were there, any kind of junk that we could find. We tried to think like kids and how they would build something.
But it was like this little circle, and you could just kind of walk around it for like an hour and a half looking at all the little fake details.
Yeah.
What remains here are the left and right piles of granite stone that we had brought in to mark the deadfall, because the deadfall I ended up using at least 6 truckloads, and that's pulp truckloads, of dead wood that we had gathered. And what's interesting is that even after 25 plus years, one of the stumps, we had 18 stumps brought in. One of the stumps is remaining. That was one of our major footholds for Fred Gwynn.
Mommy, Daddy, this is the goldfish.
There wasn't also by the road. Especially the ones from back in my time as a child. The road wasn't even paved then.
I am standing currently in the dead center of the Pet Cemetery, had a circumference of about 120 feet diameter if we really were to measure it out, but there's so much overgrowth right now. But right here was where little Spot was buried, Judd's dog.
Coming! Thanks, Mark.
The gate, the iron gate, was right about between those 2 trees, so that you swept in and were able to see that massive deadfall. When you first came in through that gate, it funneled all the way through here to the deadfall. These 2 telephone poles were put in as a back support there was a very huge backdrop here of plywood that they built in holes so that they could light through. That's where you get that really fantastic blue light coming through the Pet Cemetery.
One of the more powerful yet subtle elements of the film is the music. I think Elliot Goldenthal did a brilliant job of utilizing children's choir to accent some of the horror that was happening in the film.
This was Elliot's first big film score, and I felt like he had that sense of the fairy tale that I was going for.
The focus of a child in the movie is, the center focus of the whole thing. And I think she wanted to bring a sense of innocence and horror colliding together.
He's a mad genius. He's like Mozart or, Liszt.
It was a toy piano. There was various homemade samples that we made, scraping different instruments against the piano strings, et cetera. But the main sound effect was how I orchestrated the strings. There was so many similarities to Psycho, so I made the decision to mainly score it for string orchestra. like Psycho was, without any borrowing any particular melodies or being influenced by Bernard Herrmann's melodic approach or harmonic approach.
I get a phone call at like, I don't know, it's like 3 or 4 in the morning. He was working on the score and he's, Mary, there's the most amazing grand piano here and I'm in this palazzo and you've got to hear it. And he sets the phone down and starts playing the piano. And he just played it for about an hour. I think I went back to sleep. I woke back up. It was really fabulous. But I'm like, Elliot, come back to the phone. It's great.
I love the fact that the Ramones were able to be part of the film. Couldn't pick a better band to be part of it. I mean, I've been a fan my entire life.
Stephen King's a big fan, and he wanted Ramones songs in the movie, so he chose Sheena, and then he gave the book to Dee Dee Ramone to read, and he wrote it in 40 minutes. Pet Sematary, the main song of the soundtrack and the movie itself. So it's very simple. We met Stephen in his house in Maine, had dinner with him in his house, and one thing led to another, and that was it.
The sky was interesting. It was so blue and crystal when it was, if you remember the kite flying scene and the picnic, and right before Gage runs the road towards the terrible accident with the truck. I mean, that was the most perfect day I'd ever seen.
I remember chasing the kite handle through the field very vaguely. I just remember because it wasn't attached to a kite, they were just running it, trying to get me to chase it.
The kite had to be attached to a balloon because there wasn't any wind on one day that they were trying to film there.
Well, the scene with the truck is interesting because from my perspective, I didn't really see much of it. I'm not sure exactly how the effect was done. I know there was a giant mirror they had in the road.
I really wanted the audience to feel like he was in that road. I wanted to tear people up with it. But at the same time, I didn't want to ever put Miko in any kind of danger. You know, there was no way to have a stunt person in the road. So the one shot where the truck was actually moving towards him and he was actually in the shot, we used a mirror.
They shot into the mirror and then they placed him in front of the mirror, facing, you know, the truck is coming this way, and then you just place him wherever you want him. It can be far away. You can zoom into the mirror and bring the truck a lot closer.
The industrial area where you see me coming out of with big gas tanks, the tank farm, that was down in Hamden, Maine, at Colebrook Energy, and coming out of a paper mill in Bucksport, Maine. So we kind of traveled around Penobscot County quite a bit, and Hancock County. I had to do a lot of retakes because there was a very small tractor cab, and they actually had 3 people sitting beside me. There was a person on the back of the truck.
That's one of the most frightening scenes is the truck and the character that the truck actually plays in that movie. I thought it was just brilliant.
My wife had mentioned that it looked like I was driving 90 miles an hour. I'm assuming that was trick photography. I wasn't going more than 10 miles an hour.
They couldn't turn the truck around, so they had to go way back up to Hancock, up to Route 1 practically, and come again. And everyone wanted to know what the hell's going on with that oil truck because it kept going by people's houses, you know, like they'd lost their way.
They actually put an earplug in me so I could sing along to the music. So that was a big help. I just couldn't sing that song without hearing the music.
Watching it now is, it has a strong impact, you know, for the movie, and of course it's sad, but I think it's different. And I've had a few people, more than a few people at cons come up and tell me that the same thing, that they were okay with it watching it before, but then after they had kids, watching that scene makes that the hardest scene in the movie.
It's innocence lost in its purest sense, and you see this precious little boy. So it wasn't hard to, you know, I'd find the emotion for that.
It would be something you almost couldn't recover from. Thought of losing one of my children, you I have 3 beautiful children. And, that's just that's the unthinkable.
They needed 5 baby coffins. And we picked them up. We went to St. Joseph Church, and that's where the funeral for Gage was gonna be. And we went in and we dressed the set. They shot the scene. We all came back to undress the scene. Max, who was the lead man, he said, okay, just everybody grab a coffin, let's go load them into the truck. So I grabbed a coffin, and Max grabbed a coffin. Well, when he grabbed it, he kind of lost his grip on it, and when he did, the lid flipped up, and there was a little body in the coffin. I dropped my coffin and went to run, and there was a hole right here, and bang. I smacked my face right into the pole. I was terrified.
The most difficult day of shooting for me, absolutely, was the funeral of my child, Gage. I knew it was in the script. I knew it was coming. I was not looking forward to it. I knew that it was going to be exceedingly physically hard because you have to create a state that you need to sort of remain in for the rest of the day.
You have to bring up all these emotions. At the time, I had no children, so I had to associate his death with someone that I loved, someone that was close to me, and it was very, very difficult because it went on and on and on. For me rushing to the coffin and all that, and it was grueling. It was a grueling day. It was very emotional.
I just wanted it to be big and ugly. The idea that people would get into a fist fight at the burial of a baby like that, and that they would knock the coffin over and the body would, you would glimpse the body. There was something about that was so powerful to me when I read the scene and when I thought about the scene. I just knew that we had to have that moment where the little hand pops out of the coffin, because it's like it's foreshadowing the fact that he's going to come back from the dead. The coffin opens up, he rises from the dead briefly at his funeral.
I have a major memory of that scene. My grandchild was in a coffin. And because I was so angry with his father and went to confront him, I lost my sense and ended up knocking over the coffin with my grandchild in it. And I just became so full of grief, and I started to cry. I don't know what's still on the screen. Whether we did it again and I changed my attitude, I don't remember. I haven't seen it in such a long time. But I was so moved by the event that I cried.
There's not a lot of action in grief. Grief is a very solitary thing, and it's a bleak landscape. And I just love the fact that Stephen wrote this scene in the funeral where Louis has a fight with the father-in-law. I know a lot of people thought that scene was in poor taste. I had to recut that scene over and over again before everyone was happy with it. And I just knew that it was really important and it needed to stay in the movie.
That's part of the reason that people were so affected by the film, because the loss of the child and just wanting to bring back that child, no matter what. Looking at photos isn't enough. There's got to be something else, because you just want to hang on, And there was that scene with Fred and I and him talking to me around the table, and he's just telling me, I know what you're thinking, don't do it, but my mind is set.
Right now we're at Mount Hope Cemetery in Bangor, Maine, where they filmed certain scenes for Stephen King's Pet Sematary. One of them was Missy Dandridge's funeral, which was down there, and that's also where Stephen King officiated at her funeral. And you can even see this this little knoll and the stairway that goes up from it. I was running a store in downtown Waterville, which is about an hour south of here. And a customer came in one day and said, "Rod, did you know that they're filming a Stephen King movie here in Maine?" And I said, "No, what movie?" He said, "Pet Sematary. We just came back from watching some of the filming." So instantly, the word Fangoria popped into my head. I had written for them twice, but nothing really big. And I thought, wow, this is my chance for the big time. You know, I can actually get a set visit. And that was it. I just came here and walked up here. They were filming, so I was very quiet. There were about 150 people on the side of this knoll watching this man that was going through his motions of, and I could hardly tell what was going on, but it was Dale Midkiff. And he was giving a soliloquy about his dead son and how it was so unfair that he had died so young. And all of a sudden, ambling over from the left was Brad Greenquist, looking exactly as he did in the movie. Fangoria was the only, as far as I know, the only magazine to have any correspondent on the actual set. At the time, there were a lot of genre magazines like Cinefantastic and Film Facts and other assorted magazines, but, you know, I'm Maine, I'm local, so it didn't cost much to send me up. I'm an hour away, and I was eager to do it.
There was this one period, it was like 21 days straight. And I swear, if we had gotten 3 hours in that 21 days of sleep, we were lucky. So we went out to see if we could catch, you know, a couple hours of sleep. We laid down, and no sooner had we gotten to sleep when we heard this loud, booming voice, and it was, I don't remember the exact words, but it was like, "Praise be, Father," and opened up the door, and there was Stephen King practicing for his graveyard scene.
And there really was no better role for him to play but to be the minister. I think it's just brilliant, and I think it's fun, and I think it's entertaining for all the actors on the set.
My first scene that I had to do was to scare this old lady that's hanging up her clothes on a like old-fashioned clothesline.
That was kind of like a quick and dirty thing where they wanted him to do something, you know, he was like a zombie, and they wanted him to do something dramatic that would show that he was just out of his mind.
You know, Mary described what she wanted out of me, and the whole bit to come in and raise my hands up and do this crazy, ghoulish laugh. The next scene was working with Chuck Courtney in the house. That's where basically I'm trying to talk him into being dead with me. And the town is there to basically burn down the house because I'm an eyesore to the community.
Burning down the Baderman house was really fun because we burned the whole house down. We burned it to the ground.
I've worked with Chuck in the past, and I knew he was a little bit nervous, so you know, I kept him calm, and I got him in the fire clothes and set him up, and started with burning on the legs and the couch area until, you know, we got around the kitchen and you know, burned him up pretty good and everything.
The special effects department pumped in 8 canisters of propane gas and then had some fans to pump it up to the ceiling. The wind shifted just at the moment that the gas caught, and that all lifted up and was brought over onto where all the spectators were, all the debris. So it was a little harrowing of a shoot.
My favorite part of the film is at the end when Rachel Creed comes back and Gage comes back in the little blue suit that was, you know, mimics the painting that was on the wall in Rachel's family house. And when Gage kills the gigantic Fred Gwynne.
Gage is under the bed, and he lashes out with a scalpel and cuts Fred's leg. That was the scene in the script. And I thought, well, that seems kind of weird. He lashes out, cuts him in the leg, and Fred is vulnerable at that point. It didn't seem practical. So I said, what if Fred is bending down and his foot is at an angle where the Achilles tendon is stretched? And then when Gage reaches out and cuts the Achilles tendon, Fred is down for the count, and Gage can attack him. And they loved the idea. I had Fred there, and that's when I took a cast of his foot in that position. And that was Fred's foot cast. It was designed so that when you took a lever and pulled it down like that, the gash would open up. Normally it was closed like that, and you just go like that, and it would open up.
I thought was really scary is when Gage was I guess, eating his neck, Judd's neck.
We had this appliance on Fred's neck. It was an appliance that was kind of looked normal, and then you could bite it and rip it off, and they're trying to tell Miko, it's all a game, it's not real. You're gonna bite Fred, it's just an appliance. See, it's an appliance, it's rubber. So they roll the cameras, he goes in and he lunges and he grabs the rubber and he bites it and pulls it off. It was a beautiful scene. And then Fred went into ballistics. Like, Fred's going, giving death chortles and everything like that. And Miko freaked out. I mean, he literally freaked out. He thought he had ripped Fred's neck off. The crew, everybody just froze, and the parents rushed to Miko, and everybody was just like feeling really bad that they did this to the kid. He traumatized him.
It certainly was the highlight of the movie, having that fire.
There was like a space between the facade of Judd's house and the house behind it. And we designed it with the idea that we were going to burn the facade.
I came for the house burning. I was not working that day, but I came because Mary and everybody was talking about it on the set that we may burn the entire state of Maine down.
They had all these tanks of gas behind it, all different colors.
They assured me that nothing would go wrong.
We were trying to be as careful as we possibly could. Safety was an issue. It's tough to plan for something that you really don't do on a regular basis.
The production designers and the effects people collaborated on it, and they said, don't worry, we're not going to burn the other house down. And that's not my area of expertise.
It never even really got close to the house, but it burned.
I do remember a lot of people there, from the town. There were a lot of spectators.
Standing across the street, quite a ways away, and it felt like the fire was right in my face. It was so intense.
This thing went up like, hell. Hell came out from the ground.
We rehearsed many times where I'm supposed to walk, where I've got to walk, where I'm supposed to walk, so I'm certainly seen by the camera and the house. And I just, it's like being a character, but don't screw up the shot, Dale, because, these people are going to be really angry with you if you do.
And you see him going by the house after he set the house on fire, and he's got the dummy. You see him go like this. Dale actually got a second-degree burn on his face while he was carrying the dummy because he couldn't put her up high enough to cover his face.
At the end, when, everybody said cut, blah, 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 and everybody was moving away, I did watch it burn. That was a bit odd. It felt like an ending to me, in a way.
In terms of the ending of the film, there were 3 versions that were kicked around as possibilities. The first one was the one that Stephen King wrote in his original screenplay, which was Rachel Creed comes back to the house, finds Lewis playing cards on the floor. The phone rings. It's Ellie from Chicago. She's calling to see if her father's okay, and Rachel picks up the phone. Of course, she's undead and she's looking gross, and in a normal voice says, yes, of course, we're fine, Daddy's fine, and we're gonna be a happy family. As she's saying that, she turns to the camera and smiles, and the way King wrote it, when she smiled, her teeth were all distorted and gross and rotten, and there's a freeze frame, and that's the end of the film. The second ending, which was shot on location in Maine, has Rachel Creed coming home, finding Lewis, and when she enters the kitchen, she extends her hand, her dirtied hand, onto his shoulder. He turns around, and the camera goes black, and you hear Lewis scream.
It just was felt in general by the studio executives that we needed one more hit at the end of the movie, one more little dark, scary, outrageous moment.
We needed something graphic that would sell the end of the movie, that she was decomposed, that she had been attacked.
So I'm like, well, let's just bring Denise back, with a bug crawling out of her ear.
I get a call, you've got to come in to Paramount. We're going to reshoot the ending. We're going to make it more bloody. I think I may have seen sketches of what it was going to look like, but, until I sat there and had Lance Anderson start to, begin to build this thing, and I just remember putting on the clothing, the shredded stockings and bloodied stockings, and it began to come together.
So this is kind of the damage that Gage did, to her. So that reveal, and the goo coming out of it.
There was like a little wire kind of running through it that someone was working and leaking goop out of, and it was disgusting.
So it was the big premiere night for the film in New York City, and I enjoyed the first part of the movie, but I knew all the scary parts were coming up in the second half, and so I just politely excused myself to the ladies' room, and I probably hung out in the ladies' room for a good 20 minutes, just because I wanted to make sure I missed all the scary scenes. And I remember my mother coming in and freaking out on me and just saying, "You're missing the whole movie, this is your big night."
So the Bangor premiere, I was invited to. It was an early showing, and again, as a fifth grader, it was kind of a big deal. So it was the first time I put on a tuxedo, and I actually got a limo, and my father and I went.
Stephen King was there, and he got up and he spoke at the beginning. I mean, so cool. And then the movie started, and keep in mind, all I knew about the movie was the 5 pages I was on. And the movie is horrifying.
I think what sent me out of the theater was after the woman committed suicide after finding out that she had cancer. And it was such a realistic moment, not a crazy horror movie with knives swinging, but almost that some of this could become reality.
Lisa Stathopoulos, who went to college with me at UMO, we're sitting there watching her scene. She goes, "Oh, here it comes."
I see the first shot of the scene, and I know I haven't shot it. It's a picture of the clothesline, and there's this woman bending over a wash basket or something, and Carlene Hirsch sitting next to me leans over and she goes, "That's not your ass."
And it definitely wasn't her voice. And she got a little bit miffed at that, I think, that they voiced over her voice, because she has a beautiful voice.
They never asked me to do anything different. I think I actually originally got hired because of my voice, she said, so it was very odd.
My father came out of the movie, was like green, chugged a bottle of Pepto-Bismol, and had a couple of beers. I mean, he was really traumatized by it.
Yeah, it was a scary movie, and it took another year or so before I was able to watch it from the beginning to the end.
Pet Sematary is really a timeless story. And all the reasons that people thought it wouldn't work as a film are what have made it into such a timeless piece. It's about something that really never changes, which is the dynamic within a family and the love that parents have for their small children, and the fear that people have of death, and the desire through the ages to confound death, to get around it, to bring your loved ones back in some form, to preserve their memory. I just think that those feelings and those desires, even though they're in many cases unhealthy, are very relatable.
Dale and Fred were going to the Micmac burial ground, right, on that journey. And I was hanging in a tree, and I don't remember what the lines were. I had to say, don't go there, or something like that, just warning them not to go. But that was caught for whatever reason. But I had to hang in that tree for, maybe an hour or two all that makeup.
I was not on set for Missy's hanging when they actually shot it. I was there to, of course, tear it down. They had the rigging noose and the clips on it that were where she would be suspended and obviously not really hung. And that was something that I kept as a memento, just for fun.
We're going to be doing an interview in Maine in a couple of weeks with Donnie Green, the guy who actually was driving the truck.
Oh, wow.
This is
You guys tracked down everybody.